Now to my favourite Arafat story. It's a good story in its own right, but it has a point which I want to develop. In 1984, shortly after the first publication of the first edition of my book, Arafat, Terrorist or Peacemaker, I had a call from Tunis. For those of you who are not aware of that book, it was the first ever to tell the story of the Palestinian struggle from the leadership's perspective. In addition to Arafat himself, my prime sources were Abu and Jihad, Abu Iyad, and the Hassan brothers, Khalid and Hani. I spent more than a year virtually living with them to talk their story out of them. And for those not aware of the book also, I'll tell you, I came to two main conclusions. The first was that by the end of 1979, more than 3 decades ago, Arafat had performed a miracle of leadership by preparing the ground on his side for peace on terms which any rational government and rational people in Israel would have accepted with relief. The second was that what Arafat needed, if he was to emerge as the peacemaker he so desperately wanted to be, was a good-faith Israeli negotiating partner. Back to the call from Tunis. It was from Khalid Hassan. He was Fatah's intellectual giant on the right. When he thought it was necessary, he was fiercely critical of Arafat to his face. But nobody did more than Khalid to help Arafat sell the idea of compromise to the PNC. On the telephone, Khalid said to me, "Habibi, the chairman is very, very, very angry with you." I asked why. Khalid said, "You must come here and find out for yourself." So I went to Tunis. I was very aware that Arafat had a terrible temper, and I wasn't looking forward to being on the receiving end of it. And I wondered if our friendship was about to end. I'm going to edit myself here, and I'm going to tell you what happened when I arrived in Tunis. Arafat was having a meeting with his sort of top bureaucratic people, and they all filed out of his office, and a bodyguard who knew me well ushered me to go in. So I went in, and the door closed behind us, and as usual there was just the two of us. Arafat sat there, head down, signing papers. For a long 5 minutes, he didn't acknowledge my presence. He ignored me completely. Now that was very unusual, because Arafat was a most courteous man. If you had a meal with him, he would insist that you sat right next to him, and he would personally serve you with the food. Some of you may well know that. Anyway, I refused to be intimidated. I sat down in the chair opposite his desk, and I noticed that my book was open on his desk. And after about 5 minutes, he picked up my book, looked up at me, and shot an accusing finger at me. He was very angry, and his eyes were blazing with anger. And he said, "You have made for me very big troubles." And I said, "Well, now how? Why? What have I done?" And he read to me a sentence which I had quoted him as saying in the book. And here is the sentence, and I'll read it very slowly. "Being the chairman of the PLO is like being the only male customer in a brothel of 22 whores." Arafat pronounced the word whores. But whichever way you pronounced it, there was no getting away from the obvious implication. When he spoke those words, Arafat was telling me that he and his people were being screwed by each and all of the leaders and governments of the 22 states and the Arab League. I said to him, "But Abu Omar, you did say it, and it is true." And perhaps it was my response that caused the anger to go, because he then said, "Yes, yes, yes, I did say it. Yes, 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 it is true." Pause. "But you shouldn't have quoted me as saying it. You should have said, it was your impression of my thinking. Then I could have denied it. Now I can't." And that was that. We were still friends. Now, still today, I think there is no better way of pointing to a truth of history than with the words I quoted Arafat as saying, in which he did not deny. And the truth can be summarized, I think, like this. More by default than design, the divided and impotent regimes that were mainly corrupt and repressive Arab order betrayed the Palestinians. After the first silence fait accompli in 1948, the Arab regimes secretly shared the same hope as Zionism and all the major Western powers. It was that the Palestine file would remain closed forever. In the script written by Zionism and endorsed by all of the major powers and the Arab regimes, the Palestinians were supposed to accept their lot as the sacrificial lamb on the altar of political expediency. In that context, it can be said that Arafat's real crime, in the eyes of all who demonized him, was causing the Palestinian file to be reopened. After that, it was what I have already described as the incredible, almost superhuman steadfastness of the occupied and oppressed Palestinians that guaranteed the file could never again be closed, unless Zionism's in Israel leaders resort to a final round of ethnic cleansing and are allowed to get away with it. I haven't time to say here this evening, but I will in other places. I think that's the road that we are currently on. Now, by now, even those of you who are not familiar with my books and writings, you'll be aware that I'm a fierce critic of Zionism, the governments of the major powers, and the regimes of an impotent Arab order. But that is not the complete list of my crimes. I am also a critic of diaspora Palestinian and almost all other Arab and non-Arab activist groups everywhere. And at the risk of offending some, and perhaps many in this audience, I'm going to tell you why. As I see it, almost all of the activist groups are doing things in splendid isolation, and in doing them, they demonstrate to me that they have little or no understanding of the strategic essence of what must be done if Zionism is to be successfully confronted and defeated. If you ask me what I regard as the defeat of Zionism, my answer would be the de-Zionization of Palestine. My main point is this. While it is true that the incredible, almost superhuman steadfastness of the occupied and oppressed Palestinians is the rock, repeat, rock, on which all of us who campaign for justice stand, the struggle is not going to be won or lost in Palestine that became Israel. It is going to be won or lost here in America.